Now, it's quite interesting because in the times of COVID-19, the themes inevitably will change.
Yes.
June 16 is known and the entire month is celebrated and dedicated to young people and for young people. What was the heart of today's memorial lecture? What were the key messages that came out from the speakers?
One of the key messages, Tammy, was, of course, about government's response to the crisis, as the BITE has just alluded, the crisis that faces the country with COVID-19, as numbers continue to spike, as we are now in the next wave of this pandemic. And it was just a message to say that as the youth of June 16 stood up against what was an oppressive regime that was basically, depriving them of their right to education in a medium of instruction that they felt comfortable with. COVID-19 has also restricted what is now the country that we have in terms of the resources that we face. So this was what it was framed under. And I think when he compares, Prof. Mohale, the various responses to the other countries that we've seen, particularly the BRICS countries, when we look at India, when we look at China, when we look at Brazil. South Africa is a country that, of course, has got the resources to have been able to enact a response that could have been managed better. And this was the core message, to say that perhaps it's speaking to a lack of leadership, a lack of proper governance, a lack of proper management of our systems. And at this stage where we are, when we're looking at the next wave of the pandemic, when other countries have already perhaps even taken the baton way beyond where we could have. And this was the message, to say that we should be better, we should be expecting more, and South Africa can do better.
And who was in attendance there today?
Well, of course, the Mashinini family was there in attendance, and various other luminaries. I managed to speak to them as well. And the family is saying that in terms of remembering Tsietsi Mashinini's contribution, they are very, very happy with how the day went and the message that was delivered. Because, of course, when we're looking at Tsietsi Mashinini and others' contribution, those who led the uprising from the Morris Isaacson High School, they're saying that Tsietsi Mashinini would have been proud of the message and the speakers who made it relevant to the challenges that we're facing, with COVID-19 being such a big scourge on our country.
And I wonder, there was also Professor Mlisana who delivered the Tsietsi Mashinini Memorial Lecture. Give us the crux of that presentation.
Well, that crux of the presentation was also just about the youth and our country looking inwards and looking at the challenges that it faces in terms of the various issues that have been facing our country in the last couple of years, the issues of good governance, the issues of how poor governance affects those in our country who have less than the others. And this is a theme that can be juxtaposed with what happened within the apartheid system, whereby a whole country was just basically dedicated in terms of the systems of governance to servicing a minority of the population.
Was there a call to action for the youth? Because ultimately it really is about the youth, and in as much as platforms like this can be used to drive a more global national message, was there a call to action? What is it that young people can do to contribute to the fight against COVID-19?
Well, there was a call to action for the youth, and the call to action for the youth was to remember what's at stake, and that COVID-19 fatigue might be an issue because young people are exuberant, young people have got energy, and young people often feel stifled when it comes to issues where they have to basically self-isolate, where they have to wear masks, and COVID-19 fatigue is a real challenge. And the call to the youth was to really realize what's at stake, and that they must make sure they adhere to government's messages, social distancing, wearing masks, and that the worst is not over, and now is not the time to celebrate.
Especially because the academic year has once again been terribly disrupted. So all the more important for young people to be able to get the strength somewhere, somehow, to be able to keep on going despite the very difficult circumstances.
Yes, very difficult circumstances. And when you look at just South Africa's education system and schools in previously disadvantaged communities who don't have perhaps the same kind of material access that other more affluent areas do have in terms of learning digitally, and COVID-19 has really drawn the parallels and drawn the fault lines, therefore. So it's very important that young people need to keep determined and need to keep focused. This was the message. And of course, we had youth speakers as well from Morris Isaacson High School who said that they draw very many parallels to the lessons that were taught by leaders like Tsietsi Mashinini, who sacrificed their own youth. And now they have opportunities, albeit in very difficult circumstances, because many of them come from families that perhaps do not have the same resources I was alluding to earlier. And they're saying that it's about sticking to the ball game and keeping focused and making sure that they do what they need to do, because, of course, they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Tumaole, thank you very much for that. Certainly, it just draws upon me that the principles remain. Yes. Yet the application may differ from generation to generation, depending on what the current circumstances are. And that certainly seems to have been the case in this particular instance. Thank you very much once again.
Always a pleasure.
That's our reporter there, Tumaole Mohlaoli, who was covering the Tsietsi Mashinini Memorial Lecture in commemoration of June the 16th.